Little Horse and Big Conversation. Welcome to Little Horse and Big Conversation, where we give them their say, let the horse guide the way. Here at Little Horse and Big Conversation, we have the choice, so let's give them a voice. Here at Little Horse and Big Conversation, Little Horse and Big Conversation.
Hello and welcome back to the Little Horse Big Conversation podcast. You are back here with me, Amy Mitchell, and my co-host Ross Cooper. So, hello. We've got a topic today that is very dear to my heart and that Ross and I often have conversations about. We are going to talk today about horses and hoof handling. So from a trimmer's perspective, this is something that is really important to me. And, you know, I always say to my students, you can't do a good trim if you're trying to trim a moving target. You know, if you're trying to trim a horse's foot that's wafting around and being snatched and you know, the horse just can't keep it still or can't keep it up, you cannot do your best work on that foot, which is, for someone who takes a lot of pride in what they do, it can be a bit demoralizing when you've spent a not inconsiderable amount of time and physical energy trying to create a beautiful set of nicely balanced feet, and you look at your work afterwards and think, yeah, that's not my best work. And it's not the best for the horse, because, you know, if you're leaving a horse without perfectly balanced feet, then again, it's not, you know, the horse is then going to have compensations all through the body as a result of not having perfectly balanced feet. So there are a multitude of reasons why it's really, but also from a trimmer stroke farrier's perspective, I can go out and do a day's work and I can trim 8 horses that are horses that stand nicely for a trim, and I can come home and I can feel physically pretty good. I can go out and trim 1 horse that is being really snatchy and my body feels wrecked for the rest of the day. So in terms of physical wear and tear on my body as well, and on, you know, my colleagues' bodies, horses standing well for a trim makes such a big difference.
How long have you been trimming for now? I'm just thinking as you're talking through that.
Best part of 10 years.
So what differences can you feel, let's go physically, in your body from when you first started 10 years ago to now?
Well, it's an interesting one, because, to be honest, it's a bit of an interesting one, because I think when I used to work in an office and I was sat a lot of the time, I had a lot of lower back problems from that.
Yes, of course.
I'm also very conscious of how I hold my body while I'm trimming. And I think one of the things that I was going to mention at some point during the conversation, but now feels like as good a time as any, is that for me, if I start feeling strain through my body, so if the horse is moving or is leaning on me and I start feeling strain through my body, I will put the foot down and I'll reset and start again. You know, I don't kind of fight the strain. Where I think my farrier colleagues have got more of an issue is they can't really do that. You know, if you've got a horse's foot and you've got a shoe half nailed on and the horse is leaning all its weight on you or starting to try and snatch its leg off, you can't give the horse its foot back because you've got to finish nailing that shoe on, or else it's going to cause far more problems. So for my farriery colleagues, this is even more of a problem. But yeah, I mean, I certainly, I've had clients in the past where I've looked in my diary and thought, oh goodness, I've got those horses to do. I'm going to have to make sure I've scheduled a day off the day after. And I've had horses in the past that I've preemptively taken ibuprofen before I've gone to the appointment.
You just have to do that with any job.
No. And it's a tricky one because I've got all the patience in the world with horses that are struggling. Um, there are situations where I feel the problem could be resolved with some training.
Yes.
Um, so yeah, it's one of those things, and I know you and I have had numerous conversations about it in the past, and when I've been going to, sometimes you go out somewhere and the person spends the whole of the time apologizing for the way that the horse is snatching its legs away and is being really uncooperative for the trim, and the owner spends the whole of the appointment going, "Oh, I'm so sorry, I'm so sorry," but nothing ever changes. You don't come back the next appointment and find that they've put a load of work in or had a body worker out or set the environment up better so that the horse is more relaxed. Nothing changes and the horse is just as snatchy. And they'll spend the next appointment saying they're so sorry, they're so sorry. But nothing improves and nothing changes.
I think there is quite a I think there's quite a misconception that the hoof care provider is, and there is an element of training, don't get me wrong,
Yeah.
because you're handling, you're trimming each time we do something with horses, we are training on a level. But I think there is a big misconception for quite a majority of horse owners that the hoof handling care and training is done by the hoof care provider, which personally I have never ever felt it is the role of a hoof care provider, whether you're a podiatrist or a farrier,
No.
to train a horse for foot care. Because, as you just spoke about, the difference that you can tell in your body from when you first started to now, and the fact that some days you might have to even consider taking ibuprofen, that just shows how much of a demand is already placed on your body.
Yeah.
And that could be, you know, we all get wear and tear as we get older. That's
Yeah,
just,
for sure.
part of the parcel. So ideally, you're still going to want to be looking after your body and trimming really effectively for the next, 10, 20, even 30 years. And you want to look after yourself for that. So even though wear and tear from, general life will
Yeah.
have an impact on how you feel about trimming, it is going to be made difficult by horses that do have a lack of understanding or confidence around the trimming process, and that's not a fault of their own. That is down to a lack of preparation. And like you say, there is that awareness when someone is being quite apologetic, but it's going to mean more to you and I'm possibly making an assumption here, make you feel a little bit more valued if someone apologizes but then puts action into it. I've done a little bit of
100%.
research on this, and yeah, it's not brilliant, but you can start to see changes because that's all we're looking for. We're looking for little investments and little improvements.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And it's yeah, I mean I have become significantly less tolerant of continuing to work with people that don't put any effort in to helping with the issue. And like as I say, sometimes it is a training and a handling issue. Um,
Mhm.
very often it's not. Very often the horse has got some kind of physical problem going on that means that they struggle. And as I say, I've got all the patience in the world for those horses, but equally, for the majority of those horses, there are things that the owner could be doing to help. So, for
Agreed.
example, um, I've had someone who their horse is on a track, and the horses had been doing really, really well with the handling, and then both of them started to struggle quite a lot. Fairly big horses, both of them were leaning, snatching, like behaviors that were out of character since they'd been on the track. So, they'd both massively improved having moved onto a track and then deteriorated. You probably know who I'm talking about here. Um, But the owner got a body worker out because I'd said, look, this something's changed. There's a reason why they've started like this, they've both been so good. They're lovely horses. This is not them being naughty. This, something's not right, something's not comfortable. And the
Yes.
owner got a body worker out, had a few sessions with the body worker. The horses went back to being brilliant to trim again. Like
Yeah.
that's awesome. That's how it should be. Perfect for me. Like I love that. Um,
I love hearing that.
but also how much better for the horses? An issue's been noticed, addressed. The horses are more comfortable. I can work with them again.
And I think this is a really important thing to note with what you've just said there, is that as we're going into winter, horses are going to, generally possibly get less movement. They're stabled from time to
Yeah.
time. But also, if you do have a horse that has gone from maybe a slightly more confined environment, like a small paddock, to a track system where there's more movement, we need to think about the changes that the body is going to experience as a result.
Yes.
If there's more movement and the horse isn't used to it, that horse's body is not conditioned for the movement patterns that they may be then trying to develop and the changes in the gradient, the ground, all of those factors. So they will be at a slight disposition for tweaks and injuries.
Yeah.
Likewise, if a horse is maybe been out all summer and then they're stabled for prolonged periods, and again, if it's wet, if the horse is then a bit hesitant or feeling, a little bit ouchy or sore for some reason, that reason in itself could be due to lack of movement, and the muscles are then tightening and seizing up. So I
Yeah.
think, what you're saying about that change going from paddock to track is absolutely fantastic, and massive credit to those guys for hearing the horses and getting the body worker out, because that has just been so simple and been really effective. No issue has been caused as a result in terms of a negative association.
Yeah.
Something's not right. They've had more movement. Their body needs a little bit of help. Boom.
Yeah. 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 Exactly that. Exactly that. Yeah. And I think, you often hear people saying, "Oh, he's being naughty" or whatever. But I think the vast majority of times there is a reason that the horse is being snatchy that is not them being naughty. Like I think there are so many different underlying reasons. I think the key, like the most obvious things that I see are the horse is uncomfortable for some reason, physically uncomfortable. Like often back pain, hind gut problems, compensations from arthritis-y type issues, foot pain related issues, laminitic horse or a horse with really thin soles that don't often like picking the foot up and loading a particular leg, like tendon injuries, all those kind of physical things, general stiffness, or even thinking about like cobs, for example. I find very often cobs don't really like putting the foot forward onto the stand. They can quite often be quite snatchy from that. So if you think about kind of range of movement, like a warm blood or a thoroughbred is going to find that forward action much easier than a cob, simply from their breed type conformation. So
Yes, yeah, you straight on with the confirmation, different shoulder angles, different ways of moving.
100%. Yeah. Oh, compensation. Hang on, bear with me 1 second.
I think Amy has just interrupted her flow because Takoda is having a slight debate with his sister. So
It's
I
actually a squirrel.
oh, squirrels. So I will be filling in for the moment. So yeah, we've got a number of obviously these physical issues which will. Oh, Amy's back. I can pass back
I'm
over.
back. Yeah. We might edit that bit out. Or you might just get the bit of waffle.
Shall we keep the waffle? I think it's quite endearing.
Yeah, I mean, other things I think that we can look at is like horses with proprioception type issues. So if they've got some sort of neurological issue, and I think there are more horses than we realise that have got some sort of neurological issue going on.
And
Um,
may I just jump in with the
yeah, sure.
proprioception? Is that I find that is an absolutely massive thing that I think as you go along with your work, and if you know horses from quite a young age, you start to make a correlation between how they have been managed when they're younger. So, for example, a lot of foals, they're foaled within a box, they're up in the box and kept in the stall for maybe a couple of days before they're let out, when actually they need to be out moving
Yeah,
to create those really important neural pathways that are going to establish
yeah,
for
for
the
later
rest of their
life.
life.
Yeah,
Same with any kind of horse. So proprioception through lack of movement and a lack of those motor patterns developing, I think are a really important one, and one that I'm actually seeing um, not just in handling circles, but actually overall in terms of general movement. So sorry, I just want to jump in with that
yeah,
one.
no, absolutely right, absolutely right. Um, I also think vision relate, when we're talking about neurological things, vision can have an impact. I mean, horses have a different field of vision from us anyway, but if you've got a horse that's got a degree of vision impairment, so I mean, I trim a little pony who's now completely blind. He has, well, I have a very good relationship with him, but he understandably has some sort of issues with foot handling because he can't see, so he has a confidence sort of issue. Um, I think the environment that the horse is in for the actual trimming session is really important. So if the horse is on ground that it doesn't feel stable on, like it's wet, a little bit slippery, uneven, that's not that's not good for me either. But from the horse's perspective, if it doesn't feel, safe on its own legs, it's not going to feel safe on three legs. Whether there's flies, like horse flies about, I was saying this summer, please make sure you have fly spray. That can have implications. Are there other horses being moved in and out? Are there other horses being given their feeds? Um, you know, is it messing up? Is the horse on a real like regimented routine that they're very used to doing certain things at certain times of day? And suddenly, we're at 9 o'clock in the morning and the horse has just had its breakfast and all its mates have gone out to the field and it should be going out to the field. And suddenly here's this annoying two legs wanting to, be messing around with its feet.
And we really overlook that side of things. We kind of, because we as humans, I mean, I like structure, I don't like routine.
Yeah,
But I think as humans, we very much have our routine, which, you know, sometimes we need for to balance out life and work and so on. But I think we do need to consider how horses do find a lot of safety in routine, but routine can also work at detriment when
yeah,
things change.
yeah,
Like the
absolutely.
example you've just given, it blows them. So a
Yeah,
bit of forethought for things like that, I think, is really helpful to the horses.
yeah, absolutely. And I think the other really, really important thing is youngsters, like giving them the patience and the time to teach them to have their feet handled. And my one of my horses, when when I first got her, Jasmine, um, she absolutely walloped me on my thigh. I've got photos somewhere of this like almighty massive bruise, uh, because she didn't want to have me have a to pick her hind foot up. And I went to go and pick her hind foot up and she walloped me. And it turns out that she'd fairly recently been trimmed. This was just before I think I'd just about started my trimming training. But it was before I was qualified. Uh, and she'd been trimmed, and the person that had done her wasn't very patient and she wasn't standing still very well. Unsurprising, she was a baby. So they kind of basically trapped her up against the wall in order to get the job done.
Oh, you're
Well,
kidding. I didn't know that about Wazzles.
yeah, which meant I then had to undo all of that. So giving youngsters, I have a client now who's got a little Arab who I think is now rising too. I've been trimming her since she was probably about 3 months old.
I remember you telling me about her.
Awesome. Like her owner handles her really well. And, to start with, all we did was she'd be stood loose with her mum. I'd trim mum and then I'd just go round and pick all 4 feet up and just do tiny little bit of rebalancing. And it was never a big deal to her. And, it would just lift her foot up for 20 seconds, do a tiny bit, let her have it back. So she was able to balance. It wasn't a big deal. Her mum was there. Her mum was really relaxed. And it was great. Whereas you get other horses, I think that if you have a negative experience when they're so young, that carries on.
Shapes their
Also,
entire world.
I quite often get called out to trim horses who've had negative handling experiences with other professionals where they've been hit, kicked, yanked, shouted at, and the horse has developed an association with not wanting to have the feet handled. So like there's and rushing, like people. I'm going off on a bit of a tangent here, but one of my other hobby horse topics is you see people going, "Oh, you charge so much for a trim." Well, there is a multitude of reasons why I charge the amount that I do, and I think it's exceedingly good value for money. But one of the reasons is that I allocate at least for an average horse, I allocate at least 45 minutes for the appointment in order that I can work with the horse in slowly and in the time that it needs. I'm coming in with a nice kind of calm frame of mind. I'm not coming in rushing because I've got 20 minutes to get onto the yard, get done, get off the yard again and get to the next appointment. So the horse immediately picks up on that, like your emotions and frame of mind that you're coming into the appointment with. Whereas if you come in and you're kind of relaxed and you don't have any expectations and you can just kind of work with the horse and give it some time, give it its foot back, let it have a little break, gives you time to reassess what you're doing, do a bit more, like everything goes much better.
I remember this being a topic of conversation at the David Landville Clinic
Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
because I think I remember a few people saying, well, coming in with that kind of energy when you've got X amount of horses booked in, how do you balance the two between getting things done, but then also effectively honoring the horse?
Yeah.
And I don't think there is one answer to that. I think as long as you're putting the horse first with their capacity, but also, like you say, that intention is massive with horses.
Oh, so much. Yeah.
That's your intention is your first thing that you walk in with.
Yeah.
And that will set the standard for how the rest of that session goes. And that intention doesn't need to be, well, if we don't get the trim done, we don't get the trim done. That intention could just have a softer focus.
Yeah.
Let's see how you feel about your legs today, buddy.
Yeah.
Oh, that's great. No, thanks for that. Before you know it, you're coming in with a lighter, softer, like I've said, softer focus, as
Yeah.
opposed to, right, okay, I've got 45 minutes, I'm running behind, I need stop.
Yeah.
Stop.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
Take
Yeah.
7 minutes in your car, go do some meditation, go have a cigarette, go have some snacks, something that will just get you down from that slightly upregulated state, bring your awareness back, and then you can actually bring the right energy to the horse. So I think the fact that you've mentioned intention is huge, whether you are professionally trimming or training, but also if you're handling,
Yeah.
as all the facets, it does blend in.
Yeah. And it's interesting because I know some of my colleagues don't like horses eating whilst they're being trimmed. So because, if for example the horse has got a hay net, the horse is moving its head around because it's eating, and it can mean that they're moving a bit more and they're a bit less balanced. And when you put the foot forward, you get a load of hay drop down the back of your neck and all these sort of things. Personally, I don't have an issue with that. For me, like if the horse will stand and happily eat a hay net and be relaxed and it gives it something else to think about while I'm doing the feet, I have no problems with that whatsoever. I have some clients that are very good at clicker training and sort of positive reinforcement training, that work really well with the horses doing that, which is great. Where I think the treats issue becomes an issue is when you have people who are just literally shoveling treats into the horse's mouth as a distraction without any kind of training plan attached to it. And
Yes, and
I
I want
think
to.
occasionally that's okay. Like if you come out to a first appointment and you just really need to try and get the job done and give the horse a bit of a positive association with it, that's okay. Like it solves the problem in the moment, but it's not a long-term strategy.
No, and I think it's important to note here for anyone listening that there is a distinction between the two aspects being positive reinforcement, which is
Yes.
when you are adding something to reinforce the behavior, and when you are effectively pacifying an underlying emotional state with food, because horses do find food soothing. For anyone that's observed horses when they are out in the field grazing quite comfortably, you'll find a very rhythmic grazing motion. It's exactly the same with food. You've got
Yeah.
different levels of saliency, value on food for different horses, and it can bring them into a slightly more hyper aroused state. So I do think a lot of the time, like I was just thinking about just, examples and situations I've been in. So I'm the same as you. I have absolutely no problem with a horse eating a hay net while they're
Mm,
being trimmed. But I would take that as information. So if a horse
mm,
is very fidgety, even with food, I would be looking at that situation and going, that horse is just about holding things together because of the food, because there is something about this situation, you know, external, that this horse is not overly confident with, which is
yeah.
being shown within, how they're eating. So I think, and again, I'm looking at this objectively, and there's never any judgment from me with this. It's very much dependent on how that person wants to work and how they want to get the job done in the best way for that horse. But I think ultimately we need to look at the long-term effects of what that can cause and create an issue around, specifically within that context, but also what we can do to help.
Mm, yeah.
Because I think
Yeah.
as people, we can get very complacent. And
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
we're all guilty of that.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it's an interesting one. And going back to your comment about the sort of difference between training with a reward versus kind of distracting with just shoveling treats in. Um, I know it's a few years ago now, but you and I both, did you read that book, Punished by Rewards? Or did we just talk
It's
about it? Is it one of those
we
that's
still,
still on your bedroom cabinet of
it's still on the cabinet. Honestly, I've got about 25 books and I've ordered three more. And I'm still not down for audiobooks. I
that's where
like.
you're missing out, you see. Get yourself on Audible and you can listen to all these things as you drive around.
Do you
Um,
know what? November, I'm going to download Audible. I'm going to get the
you need to
30-day
do
free
it.
trial and start
Yes,
hammering some of these books.
yes,
It feels like
absolutely.
I'm cheating on my books, though.
It's fine. They'll still be there for you, Ross.
Do you know what? Yesterday, I drove through Bakewell and I got really excited because they've opened up a second-hand bookstore. I
Ah,
like second-hand books. I'm like, yes. Anyway, for anyone who's
Yeah.
passing Baker on the Peak District, there is a really nice second-hand bookstore. Go visit. It's opposite the cake shop, which is an added bonus. Sorry, Amy, carry on.
Yeah, his name's Alfie somebody or other. It'll come back to me. But the
Let's have a
book's
quick
called
Google.
Punished by Rewards, and it's actually about people. Um, but it talks
Alfie
about
Coon.
how, yeah, I think it's something like that, isn't it? Um,
Alfie Con.
that's it.
Sorry.
But it talks about how
Kohn.
it actually can drive very different behaviors to the ones that you think you're driving, and it talks about like using rewards with children, and it talks about using rewards for people in the workplace, like workplace reward schemes and so on, and how actually the motivation, like you get the end result that you're looking for, but the motivation behind it can be quite negative sometimes. Anyway, it's a really fascinating book. But I think that is the thing when you have someone who is just shoveling food into the horse's face as a distraction. That's not, to me, that's not actually training. That's putting a sticking plaster over a problem. And as I say, sometimes you might need to do that to get the job done, or maybe something particular has happened, and a horse that normally is pretty good has either got some unexpected pain issues, or something's going off on the yard that's stressing them out, and you use that as a right, okay, for today we're going to use this just to keep everybody safe and to get the job done. But my issue is then, for the horses that are always needing that, that's not right. And those are the horses that I
No.
don't feel comfortable trimming, because they're leaning, trying to desperately like get the next snack, and their brain is totally on the handler to be constantly like mugging them for the treats, and the horse is not really aware that I'm there. I'm just a kind of a total aside to them, and I don't, so that doesn't feel safe particularly. But also, as soon as the owner runs out of treats, you've got a horse that goes back to being even more snatchy and cross, because it's suddenly like, well, this is not what happens. We do this and I get all that stuff. And if you're not giving me all that stuff, then kind of screw you, sort of thing. So it's the situations that kind of annoy me a bit are the situations where the horse is like that and needs that constant food, 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 but the owner is not doing anything in between appointments to fix the underlying problem.
And I think that's within that there's another really important distinction to make, which was a point well made, is that if you are still getting the same behavioral responses within the context of the situation and it isn't changing and even worsening, then
Yeah,
something needs to change. Because I think and again, it's never a one size fits all. It's always, multifaceted with what works for that situation at the time. But you
yeah,
always want to be helping the horse to feel better, and for the owner also to be taking accountability and feel productive and progressive, and you as the hoof care provider to be going, yeah, okay, this is all going in the right direction. So I think food can be brought in to help make a situation more positive,
yes,
but if that horse is continuing to exhibit dysregulation
yes,
and there's no improvement, and no, the horse is obviously going, you know, this is how I feel, this isn't changing, then that's when the use of food in that context, I
mm,
feel, would need to be readdressed and look at what other underlying factors. So just sticking with the food subject, and for anyone who knows how I work with a good handful of horses with positive reinforcement, and they get on really well with it. But I always make sure that it's always really appropriately applied. Um, but when it comes to food and hay and the level of value, if you've got a horse that like you've already said, Amy, if you've got a horse that has got gastric issues or
Hmm.
inflammation in the gut, if a horse is maybe on restricted rations or if they are quite gutsy, then they're going to be very fixated on the food because of that imbalance within their body. So that's always something to factor in on as well and just be aware of. I mean, we have already done a podcast on gastric pandemic
Yeah.
and the issues that, are arising very commonly because of, issues going off within the gut. So if you haven't listened to that, that's a very interesting one to listen to. But the two are so often and commonly interlinked. And,
Yeah, absolutely.
like we've said, it is ultimately the responsibility of the owner to train their horse for, for their life skills. And I want everyone to know who may be struggling with that they are not on their own with
No,
this,
absolutely
because
not.
there are a multitude of professionals out there, trainers, behaviorists who would be really happy to assist you with the issues that you're experiencing. And I know the world's a little bit unstable at the moment, um, as are half of us. Um, but it's one of those where, okay, you might be watching finances. Let's have a one-off session. Can I have some pointers, please? And then may I rebook you in for 6 weeks' time for a follow-up? And
Yeah.
can you give me a plan to just work on these little basics? Which I think is always, you know, any trainer or behaviorist will be super super happy to work with work with someone in that within
Yeah,
that bracket, because ultimately it's helping everyone else out,
absolutely.
but working towards creating a dynamic which is a lot healthier.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. And from the horse's perspective, I mean, I don't know if you can hear that beeping. Could you hear the beeping? No, that's all right then. My dishwasher was making some
I thought it was about to be
quite loud
abducted.
beeping. So, but obviously the microphone's doing a good job of filtering it out. Um, well, what was I saying there? Yeah, I mean, from the horse's perspective, for the horse to find having its feet trimmed a non-stressful experience, how much nicer is that for the horse? I mean, that's and these, I think, like these basic ground handling skills
Mm.
leach into every other aspect of the horse's life as well. If you've got a
Oh,
horse that's
completely.
good with all those kind of just basic handling skills and is confident with them and has got trust in the people that are handling them, whether, the owner or whoever the handler is, plus the trimmer, the foot professional. I mean, I, I think, yes, okay, we're talking about the fact that it's not the role of me as hoof care person to train the horse, but as you pointed out, I think early at the beginning of this, we definitely have an influence.
Yes, and I think
I'm
again,
not in any way like removing my responsibilities from this. Like I want every horse that I trim to have a positive experience. I want that horse to feel that it can communicate with me, that if it's sore, or it finds flexing its hock too much, or it finds a particular position difficult, it finds bending its knee too much difficult. I I hope to be able to build a relationship with a horse that is such that the horse can communicate that to me, and I'll be like, okay, that's not a problem, mate. Let's find a way to work around this. Like, what can you do? Okay,
and
so that's
that's one of the
comfortable
massive.
for you. How does this feel for you? Can we do this instead? And
And
I,
that's one
and
of the
I
massive
think
ways.
that's really important that I do that.
Yes, and that's one of the ways that I love about how you work, because it's not the hoof care provider's responsibility, in my opinion,
Mm,
to train the horse, But there is a responsibility, as you're saying, and everyone's different, to conduct themselves in a professional and ethical way.
100%.
Because I very much, we seem to have we seem to have an acceptance of poor treatment of horses during a trim.
Yeah.
And it always concerns me, and it goes in fits and starts, that the amount of physical assault there is on horses, whether that is smacking them with their hand, whether that is rough handling, or whether that is actually going at them with tools,
Yeah.
which none of that is acceptable. It's not going
100%.
to amount to a good experience. And, we're only human, and that, you know, we reflex at times if we're feeling a bit protective or a bit unbalanced. It's taking accountability and voicing that, which I think is very important. Um, but
But I
repetitive
think,
behavior
but
for
the
me
other
is a
thing
red
is,
flag.
as a professional working with a horse, I think we also have to feel confident to turn around and say, actually, I don't think we're going to do this today.
Yes, which I think is healthy. That's you going, again, sorry, in my opinion,
Yeah.
that's me going, that is a great way to handle it. I'm going to be unsafe handling this horse. This horse needs work. I cannot
Yeah.
trim, which you guys are
Yeah.
all perfectly within your right, in my opinion, to say, because you shouldn't never be putting yourself in a dangerous
No.
situation. That's for us to do.
Yeah. Yeah. I have no problem with saying, actually, this doesn't feel good today. Um, Someone's going to get hurt. We're not doing it. Let's make another appointment.
Yes.
I have no problem with that. And I think that is an important thing from a professional's perspective, is to be able to make your own risk assessment, know what you're comfortable with doing and what you're not comfortable with doing, and never feel like, oh, like an ego. I think that's the danger, is that ego takes over and you get into this like, well, I'm gonna get this done. I'm not going to be the
Yeah.
person that all the the liveries on the yard that are watching are like, oh look, he couldn't even handle that whole. You know what I mean? Like, I don't care what, what other people think, because it's my personal safety. But it is easy to get into a situation, I think, where you feel like you're being judged, and that you've got to get the job done as a result.
Yes.
I think it's
Yeah.
really, really important that, and in your, not just with hoof handling, I think with any sort of work, is being able to assess the situation and think, actually, this is not conducive to a positive experience for anyone, and actually it's got the potential to be dangerous. So
Yes.
let's not do this.
Because for me, any work around hooves doesn't start with the hooves.
No.
It's, I think we very much, we underestimate what a horse needs from us to be able to feel safe.
Mm,
And if you look at it in terms of basic evolution with horses, what makes them, what is completely unnatural to them? Someone lifting their foot up and then putting them in a box.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
That's going to add a level of confinement, that adds restriction. So, and then, there's so many ways that that is going to be perceived. But ultimately, for me, I want the horse to be able to feel safe within that situation, within that context, for us to then build.
Yeah.
And it always varies. Because I don't have a way that I maybe have a tendency to approach working with hooves, but it needs to be adaptable because you're never going to get the same horse twice.
No, no, of course not. Absolutely.
So I always want to make sure that the horse is happy in mind and body before you start asking them to do anything which is physically taxing. And we look at hoof handling and go, oh, well, they've got four legs, they can just stand on the other three. No, 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 no.
No.
No, it doesn't work. It doesn't work like that. It's completely unnatural. They need
Yeah.
to establish balance.
Yeah.
In terms of balance, they're usually going from, forelimbs to hind limbs if they're lifting any off the ground. So, we need to consider balance overall, looking at posture, looking at how they move, look at how they hold themselves statically or dynamically. Where do they feel comfortable being touched? How
Yeah.
do they feel about that touch? Can you touch them and hold them without brace? Because that's going to be your first one. Your first interaction is when you walk into the field. If your horse is not wanting anything to do with you consistently, I mean, their horses are very good at pairing. So they'll know by your intention, by what you're wearing, by who's shown up at the yard,
Yeah.
whether you're going to lead them in for a hay net or whether your trimmer's arrived and you've got 45 minutes to get this done. So they're going to pick up on that energy straight away. So how do they feel about everything that you do to that point? And I think what's really beautiful is the fact that I've worked with, and it seems to go in fits and starts, actually. I was thinking about this a few weeks ago, which is really sort of poetic that we're doing this topic, is that over the summer, I've probably had about 7 horses on my books who I've been working with their hoof handling.
Interesting.
So, and it's not uncommon for me to work with hoof handling, but in terms of um the percentage, the high percentage of cases,
Yeah.
let's say, for want of a better phrasing, there seems to be quite a lot this year. Now, all those horses that I'm just thinking about have all had they all come from varying backgrounds. There's a couple that I've worked with that have effectively been feral and then been mishandled for the first few years of their life. Therefore, you're having to work on gaining more trust and making sure that they're okay with the building blocks that lead up to that. And there's a really lovely horse that I work with called Maya, and she's 4 now. And she's just started being trimmed after not being trimmed for 2 years.
Yeah.
Um, I think 3 years because I started working with her last year actually. And we've made some really good progress with her forelimb lifting. But I'm like, well, we'll work with that because she's a lot more confident with being touched down, flanks, and bump. But I'm like, we're building up to that. And she has recently, as a result of how she feels about all of this consistent, safe interaction that we're doing with her, the other day she just presented a hop and we just
Ah,
literally touched a
really?
hop and she lifted her leg. And she chose that.
Yeah, that's very
That
cool.
wasn't us asking. She chose it.
Yeah.
Whereas there's some other horses that I've seen quite a lot of gut issues this year,
Yeah.
which have been, as we know, gut affects behavior, which
Yeah.
then affects their ability to focus and learn within a situation productively, but also is going to affect their ability to be able to, lift their limb and present themselves in the way that.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's really important to remember that horses with hind gut problems will struggle having their hind feet lifted to trim, and particularly the right hind, because of the positioning of the cecum. So
Yes, yes,
it's quite an interesting marker of gut issues in horses.
yes, massively.
You've got a horse that doesn't want to have its right hind lifted or is being a bit kicky with the right hind when it's being trimmed. My
Mm.
immediate thought is there a hind gut issue going on here?
Yes. So there's all of these factors to take into consideration where they, balance, posture, muscle tone, muscle buildup, gut issues, where they feel happy being touched. And working with these elements going forward, you can never, ever eliminate pain.
No,
That's not possible. Anyone that says otherwise, no, it can't be done. We do not have the resources to do that.
no.
So we need to look at the factors that are presenting and work through whether there is a pain or discomfort related cause happening. But regardless of that, we want to try and make the process as easy and as confident as possible. So
Yeah.
that could be something really simple, like doing a little bit of touch-based work, not just on the outside of the leg, on the inside if your horse isn't used to having it. If you're maybe struggling a little bit with mobility, you could use an extension, whether that is using a flag or a stick or something to get them accustomed to being touched within that area.
Mm,
So you're not having to compromise your body in the meantime. You can change the angle of lifting. You could use different gradients to take load off forehand hind limb aspects. Hoof
absolutely.
pads are a really good,
Yeah.
beneficial one that are gaining
Yeah.
some traction now.
Yeah.
So making all these little adjustments and seeing where your relationship is and how your horse feels about everything that you do up to that point is going to be really, really important.
And
Because it
another
might,
thing to add on to the pain issue is like if you know your horse has got pain issues and that's contributing to it, have a word with your vet and get some bute prescribed to be given like in a couple of days leading up to when you've got a trim appointment. Because just giving the
yes,
horse some
yes,
pain
completely.
relief, and it's important to point out under the Veterinary Act, you need to speak to the vet about that. You can't just like start chucking drugs in willy-nilly. But giving them some pain relief beforehand so that it's less uncomfortable can make a massive
Yes,
difference.
it
I
does.
trim in fact I did him yesterday, a big cobby horse, Jared. He's lovely, but he's pretty arthritic. And at the moment he's a bit chunky as well, which doesn't help. Um, but with him, if he's not had any pain relief before I come, he's just like, yeah, I literally can't lift my hind feet off the floor. And there's been occasions I've just not been able to do his hind feet because he's literally been like, no, I just sorry about this, but I can't do it. And he's very nice about it, but he would just be like, no, I can't do it.
Yeah.
Whereas, now he has some bute like a couple of days leading up to it, and then a bit of extra on the day of the actual trim, uh, and it just takes the edge off for him. And I still have to keep his feet really low and just do like a little bit, give him his foot back, but we get the job done. He's not in great discomfort, and I'm not like killing myself trying to get him to, like either having to hold all his weight because he can't physically, he needs to lean on me in order to support himself, and that sort of thing. So
Yeah.
I have no qualms about people getting some pain relief from their vets. I think it can be very, very advantageous. On a
Yes.
similar note, what I don't like and would avoid as far as much as possible is trimming horses that have been sedated. I mean, there's been the odd occasion that I've done it because it's been, a kind of an emergency situation,
Mm.
but it's not something that I like to do. I mean, one, I don't think it's great for the animal being given the sedative, but two, from a trimmer's perspective, like they can suddenly come out of it and then panic and you can end up getting seriously hurt, or they can collapse on you, and it's so that is not that's not an answer, I don't think.
No, no, no.
So what do we think are some of the proactive things, like, so for me, I think setting the environment up
I think that's primary.
is really important.
Start where your horse is comfortable.
Yeah.
101.
I mean, I often get somewhere in person will say, where do you want to do him? Like, where's he going to be most relaxed? Like, wherever
Yes.
he's going to be most relaxed, that's where we'll do it.
Yes, because you can
Um,
always shape the changes to
yeah,
different situations within the horse's remit, but
yeah,
that can be done outside of your appointment.
absolutely. And I don't have an issue, so long as we're not talking like muddy, slippery, wet ground. I don't have an issue with trimming a horse in the field if that's where the horse is most comfortable. You know,
Yeah.
so I think setting the environment up for success, choosing a time of day when the horse is likely to be relaxed. There's not like loads of other horses coming in and out, having feeds, this, that, and the other, all those things we talked about earlier. So selecting an appropriate time of day if you've got a horse that's likely to struggle, picking the location, having a friend in for them if they're likely to be more relaxed, having a friend, taking the time. Like, so another thing that grinds my gears is when you see somebody turn up to trim a horse's foot, they walk straight up, grab the horse's foot, and then wonder why the horse is like, what the feck do you think do you know what I mean? Like, somebody waltzed up to me and grabbed my arm and started doing something, I wouldn't be best thrilled. I think just you know, taking a little bit of time just to say, oh, you're right, mate, how things, and just introduce yourself to
Check
the
in.
horse. Yeah, check in with them. Giving them a
Yeah.
hay net if a hay net is helpful. I personally, as I say, have no problem with that. But it for me, it's always with anything is like, what's the root cause of the issue that we've got, and
Mm.
then addressing I feel like this is the same with everything we do with horses, and I think it's where we go wrong so much with horses is symptom management rather than identifying and addressing root cause. So like the shoveling treats in one after another just as a distraction, that's a symptom management thing. It's not right, what's the underlying reason why we've got an issue here?
Disengaging your
If you
horse
don't
in consistent
identify,
circles.
and usually there's multiple underlying reasons,
Yes.
but there'll be one that is the primary thing. That is a pain related issue or a fear related issue or a lack of being able to balance or lack of trust. There will be an underlying, and I think as well from a trimmer's perspective, as part of what I see my responsibility is also being able to kind of understand what the likely root cause is and then be able to, so with a horse that's wanting to snatch its foot back, when is it right for me to say, all right, yes mate, I hear you, you can have your foot back, and when is it for me to say, actually no, you can work through this, and put a boundary in place and say, actually no, I'm going to keep hold of your foot a bit longer here because actually for what's going on here, I think actually you can hold it up. But it's knowing the
Yes.
difference between the two.
And I think a lot of that comes down to feel and
Yeah,
experience to be able to
yeah,
gauge that as effectively as you can. It's
yeah,
progression without compromise, effectively.
yes, yeah. Because I feel personally, I feel like no is not a dirty word.
No,
Now
it isn't.
this could open out to a whole different podcast episode, but I
Yes.
let's write that one down.
Right. Writing now, writing now.
But I don't have any problems if the horse is doing something and I feel it's inappropriate to say, actually, no, that's not what we're doing. You don't have to do that in an unpleasant way, but just to say, actually, no, we're going to carry on with this review. Okay, now you've relaxed your leg, lovely. Okay, now you can have it back.
Boundaries and structure. And I think
Yes.
this leans into a little bit of the learned behavior that we spoke about before we started recording.
Yes.
Because, we've spoken a lot about reasons that may be present at that time,
Yes.
but actually when things have maybe settled down, maybe been worked through, there can still very often be an element of association that that horse has developed through experience, through obviously associative learning. So, that's generally because of external or internal stimulus. So something that they've experienced outwardly or something they've been feeling internally. And I'm not going to go through the different ways that I would work with that because I am very tailored to that specific horse.
Mm,
But
yeah.
what I would do is I would consider all the factors and then gauge that horse's behavior within that context and ensure that we saw progressive behavioral changes and progressive emotional changes in relation to what it is that I'm doing. That doesn't mean to say that I might not see a little bit of upregulation and a little bit of a burst from now and then, but it is very nuanced within that situation to kind of go, okay, this is what we're getting,
Mm,
this is what we're working through. But most importantly, it is the time frame, it's the capacity that that horse has got to be able to stay with you and offer a try within that situation. Don't ask a trying horse to try. If you've
yeah.
managed to work on, something really progressive with a negative association that they have with their left fore being handled,
Yeah.
Just work on that left foot. And this is another thing. When I go out and work with horses' feet, I very rarely discuss working with all of the feet.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
will work with maybe 1 foot, 2 feet. I'll try, and again, very much guided by what I need to do and where that horse's body is and where they're mentally at the time. But I might do front feet and then work on back feet, or I might work on back feet, which is actually very commonly what I do because they generally load their fours.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's gauging and working to counter condition and replace that negative association with something more positive. Then there are multiple ways to do that, but it just needs to be right for your horse
Yeah.
and for you
Yeah.
as an owner, as a professional, and as a person.
Yeah. 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 Absolutely. Yeah.
Blimey, I think we've covered a lot of ground, haven't we?
I think we have. Yeah. Yeah.
I wonder how many people's minds are blown.
Ah.
I
Ah.
think
Yeah.
episode 12 was about 30 minutes long, and we are obviously due to life experiences, we are slightly delayed in getting this episode out. So everyone's going to be
Yes.
like, "Oh, they're back with over a 60-minute podcast. We have missed them."
No, I
Right.
think it's been
So
good. It's a topic
I'm
that,
going to
understandably is dear to my heart. And yeah, I think it's
and I hope there's a little bit of something that professionals and owners can take away from that in
yeah.
a positive light.
And I think that that leads on to kind of a final comment, really, that it's also important that trimmer, stroke farrier, and owner talk about these things and talk about a strategy, to like turn up, okay, this is what we're dealing with. Right, how are we going to approach this today? What have you been doing in between visits? You show me how you pick your horse's foot up. Like having the two-way conversation between the two of you, I think is also really important.
Communication is the key to cooperation.
Yeah. Oh, there we go. You see, you've done it again, Ross.
I was literally just bricking myself. I'm thinking, oh, is Amy's going to end it? And oh my days, I don't have a line. Boom,
Yes.
line.
Love it. Love it. So I think, I mean,
Mic drop.
that is the perfect note to end on. So thank you all very much. Hopefully you've enjoyed this episode. If you have, it would be fabulous for us if you would like and maybe even give a little comment on whatever podcasty app you are using, because it helps the app
Spread the word.
platform to decide where to distribute it to. So it will get shown to more people if it looks like something that people are interested in and people like. So do us a big favor and give it a like and a share and a positive comment. That would be amazing. 5-star rating would be awesome. But yeah, and we will look forward to catching up with you on the next episode.
See you later.